You know, it's officially F1 season when the first major controversy hits the paddock, and this time it's another case of teams possibly bending the rules in their favour. The spotlight is once again on McLaren, with accusations that they've revived their old Mini-DRS trick from last season. But here's the kicker: Ferrari might be doing it too. The drama started brewing during pre-season testing in Bahrain, where sharp-eyed analysts noticed some suspicious movements in the rear wings of both McLaren and Ferrari. This immediately set off alarm bells, as it looked eerily similar to last year's controversy when McLaren was accused of exploiting a flexible wing design to gain a straight-line speed advantage. But now it's not just them. Ferrari has seemingly jumped on board with the same idea, and let's just say Red Bull is not amused. During last week's testing, Ferrari team principal Fred Vasseur and Red Bull's Christian Horner had a moment of agreement, which itself is quite rare, as they praised the FIA's efforts in clarifying flexible front wing regulations. However, just as that chapter was about to close, new onboard footage surfaced showing something questionable happening at the rear of McLaren and Ferrari's cars. One unnamed team principal, who we can assume is keeping a very close eye on this, spoke to the media about the potential rule breaking. Looking at the videos we've seen, some of the rear wings out there appear to be quite flexible. It is something we are keeping a very close eye on. And by some of the rear wings, they pretty much mean Ferrari and McLaren. This whole Mini-DRS saga first kicked off last season when McLaren was suspected of using a mechanism that increased the slot gap in their rear wing under high speeds, effectively acting as a secondary drag reduction system, DRS. This would allow the car to cut through the air with less resistance, gaining an extra boost down the straights. It was a very clever trick until rival teams caught on and complained to the FIA, forcing McLaren to make changes. But now it looks like history might be repeating itself. Reports suggest that Ferrari and McLaren have potentially found a way to make the entire rear wing structure rotate slightly backward under aerodynamic load, achieving a very similar effect. Red Bull's technical director Pierre Wash isn't convinced that the issue was ever resolved, stating, "It is still going on. I think Ferrari and McLaren are doing the Mini-DRS stuff still." Here's the thing: pre-season testing isn't subject to full FIA compliance checks, so teams can push the boundaries without immediate consequences. But once the cars hit the track for the official start of the 2025 season in Melbourne, any rule breaking could lead to protests, forced modifications, or even penalties. Wash, for one, believes the issue will become unavoidable once we reach the Australian Grand Prix. It will be an issue. It is quite visible. And he's not wrong. The FIA has already tried to clamp down on these rear wing shenanigans before, after McLaren's controversial rear wing design made waves at the 2024 Azerbaijan Grand Prix. The governing body made some key changes to the regulations. The allowed slot gap width was reduced from 10 to 15 millimeters to 9.4 to 13 millimeters. The upper boundary for the DRS opening remained at 85 millimeters. A new rule was added stating that the DRS bodywork must stay in either a full open or fully closed position, eliminating any possibility of gradual flexing. To put it simply, no more sneaky adjustments. The DRS needs to be binary. It's either on or off. Article 3.10.10 of the F1 technical regulations makes this crystal clear. Except in the event of a DRS failure or transitioning from one position to the other, the DRS bodywork can have only two positions, such that the DRS bodywork position must be the same before and after each state of deployment. The transition time between the two positions must be less than 400 ms. In addition to this, the FIA introduced a further reinforcement under Article 3.15.17, ensuring that the gap between rear wing sections must not exceed 2 millimeters under aerodynamic loads. All of this was meant to stop teams from trying to gain an edge using flexible wing designs. But if Ferrari and McLaren have indeed found a loophole, things could get messy real fast. If we go back to last year's McLaren incident, the trick lies in the way the rear wing reacts under aerodynamic forces. Normally, every car has a gap between the rear wing flaps when DRS is closed, which must fall within the regulated 10 to 15mm range. However, McLaren's wing had a unique design that allowed it to slightly flex, effectively widening this gap at high speeds, mimicking the function of DRS even when it wasn't activated. The current suspicions surrounding Ferrari and McLaren stem from a similar concept. Observations suggest that their rear wings might be mounted in such a way that, under high-speed aerodynamic load, the entire structure tilts backwards slightly, creating an unintended DRS effect. This would explain why their slot gap appears more pronounced compared to other teams. A deep dive into the design reveals that while most teams have a slight curvature leading to the rear wing, McLaren and Ferrari's wings appear almost flat in certain angles. This could allow the slot gap to open more vertically rather than at an angle, which could be their secret sauce for squeezing out extra straight line speed. With the first race of the season fast approaching, all eyes will be on the FIA to see whether they take action against McLaren and Ferrari. If teams lodge formal protests in Melbourne, we could see a full-scale investigation and potential rule clarifications, just like what happened last year. McLaren has already been through this once before, and after making adjustments to comply with FIA demands, they surely know the risks of getting caught. As for Ferrari, this wouldn't be their first time navigating a technical controversy, and it likely won't be the last. Red Bull was expected to be the one to spill the beans on this issue, and honestly, judging by their performance, which is not looking as dominant as before, who can blame them? After years of running the show, they might actually be feeling the heat for the first time. Max Verstappen wrapped up pre-season testing in Bahrain with mixed emotions, admitting there's still a bit of work to do before the season kicks off. With his new teammate Liam Lawson handling double shifts the day before, Verstappen took charge for the final round of testing in the Sakir Desert, putting the RB21 through its paces. By the end of the day, the reigning four-time world champion clocked the second fastest time, just 0.021 seconds behind Mercedes' George Russell after racking up 81 laps. I think we had a decent day today. Verstappen reflected there were a few little problems, but overall we got through a good chunk of what we needed to. While second place in testing isn't the worst outcome, Verstappen wasn't exactly celebrating. It wasn't bad, but at the same time there's still a bit of work to do, he admitted. It's what we expected though, so we'll keep working, keep trying to improve, and hopefully by Melbourne we'll have a clearer picture of where we stand after analysing the data. It's tough to gauge where everyone else is at right now, so we just have to focus on ourselves. We're looking forward to finally getting back to proper racing in Australia. Meanwhile, Red Bull's technical director Pierre Wash admitted he wasn't fully satisfied with how the RB21 responded at times. The car didn't react quite how we wanted, and the improvements weren't as big as expected. That's something we'll need to work on for the first race and beyond. But back on the main topic, whether or not the FIA cracks down will depend on just how much of a performance advantage this trick is providing. If McLaren and Ferrari suddenly find themselves consistently topping the speed traps in Melbourne, expect protests to come flying in faster than a Red Bull on a straight. With the FIA constantly tightening the regulations to prevent flexible aerodynamics, it remains to be seen whether Ferrari and McLaren will have to modify their designs before the Australian Grand Prix. Given that the governing body has already set precedents with previous rear wing controversies, it's likely they'll be keeping a very close watch on this situation. So what do you think? Have Ferrari and McLaren actually found a very clever loophole, or are they simply operating within the grey areas of the rules? And if the FIA does step in, could this be the first major scandal of the 2025 season? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and while you're at it, drop a like and a subscribe.